Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Scannell Agenda. This is show number 14, and today's date is March 21st. So on the last show, I was talking about an industrial site at the east end of the canal. Now that I have pictured here. Here you'll see a tender vessel for the windmills. It's a converted oil tanker that carries the Nauset mills out to let's say the Nauset mills would go maybe about 4 or 5 miles east of the Cape out here. And they'd go from probably Truro, and you could basically run them around Nantucket and the Vineyard and, into Rhode Island area. And those would be basically small but different, and they may not have wave generators, but they would definitely have the tire reefs. So here we have an industrial area, and this is a floating port, which is 1.5 miles wide here. And then you've got windmills. I've got 7 windmills drawn on this seaward side. They're large, heavy-duty windmills. Then you've got cranes over here for this windmill work. And so there'd be a lot of talent that would have to be brought to bear on a project like this. So you may want to involve Bath Iron Works and electric boat down there in Connecticut, and the smartest people would have to be called in to turn this kind of thing into reality. Now here I have drawn in a huge addition of beach and dunes to Sandwich. And here's the town, the center. This is the boat basin. Excuse me, and the Merritt plant. And this is the canal, obviously, right here, you see. Certain amount of, I have a certain amount removed to make way for this solid fill pier out here. Now this is a nice Scusset State Park Reservation camping, so I must be in dreamland to think that's going to get removed, right? Probably. But to a lot of people that may be an offensive idea. But, if you create other, if that's the only one and only site that would be practical, you can create other acreages to mitigate the fact that you stole the camping site from the state. Or, so back to the bridges. Your traffic patterns would have to all be designed for this middle bridge. And so that's a lot of money there, certainly, which may not be worth doing a project like this. May not be worth it. I'm not saying necessarily it is a wonderful idea. I'm just a brainstormer type guy. So the Nauset Mill construction at the canal, you'd have to have people from Bath Iron Works, and I know Quincy Shipyard's been shut down for a long time, but of course you got New Bedford, Quonset, Rhode Island, electric boat. And the design that I have for the Nauset mills looks like a glorified boat stand, if you know what a boat stand is. Just a regular boat stand with 4 legs and then the shaft that comes down. And then it would have a kind of a mushroom anchor base, and your stick would go into the sand. But if all hell broke loose, these things could tip over and you could right them again. Ice, hurricanes, what have you. Here's an idea for mid-channel supports for a bridge, which is probably a bad idea. We don't need to do that, but we could. I suppose, if we wanted to split the canal. Not a good idea, really. Not good. And then here's something. This is a parking garage over the bridge. I don't know, that's kind of nutty. So you can see that that would be a tourist attraction up there. But who would design that? Here is a building over the bridge. So you design your bridge as a building. Crazy. Good thing not many people think like this. Huh? Oh, here's an emergency props for a span. Now that's ridiculous. Because if you're worried about your cables, well, I suppose, you know, what would ever, you know, an earthquake wouldn't do it, but war or an attack or something. So it's not a very good idea. But you gotta, if someone asks that question, well, at least I've thought of it. Here's a sensible idea someone else came up with, and that is to put some test data windmills, like a few basic windmills, up on top of Sagamore, just to get some readings for what the wind is up there. Not my idea, but I don't care. I can steal ideas. That's not beneath me. So here is one of my earlier. What's that say? Landside gaining height. So a lot of this stuff that I draw is for the landside before you get anywhere close to the canal. With this particular bridge being so high up, the deck would be phenomenally high up. Like I said, a couple hundred feet higher up than, you know, my grandmother. Oh, she hated to go over the bridge. You know, my mom would go pick her up in Rhode Island and bring her back, or bring her home from Providence, Rhode Island. My grandmother would just, her knuckles, oh, my mom said it was just ridiculous. She'd get very shook up to go over the bridge. Here's one with, and this says it's a pilgrim evacuation project for a paper bag poster of these, a lot of these kind of crazy ideas with the pilgrim evacuation. And this is the railroad system that I've got drawn up, 10-foot gauge railroad. Now in the old days, they really thought that the rails were very good for tourism, and I still think that's true. Here's a couple that have to do with using, I call it pressed pipe and post. It's a concept I'm working on because for the tripe system I used a lot of pressed pipe transport vessels to transport trains. So that's from that. So as you can see, you've got a lot of cabling up here, and these are these pipes here, and then you've got these yokes are undercarriage instead of over. In this case, that's all. You don't have two. Wanted to display some of this stuff, and I should have gotten my act together, but I didn't. The Cove Clubhouse had a nice art show, so I wanted to put some of this in as invention art. But what I'd really love to do would be to get it all scanned and have a blanket patent put on the whole thing so that I can share the whole mess. And I'm sure there are some pretty good concepts in here. Now, I'd like to know and get a tour of the canal area if I'm going to get into this project. And so past and present, old photos. So I'd like to know more about this canal zone. So if someone out there would give me a tour, and if there were a bridge club or something, a bridge club, that'd be nice. I could never play bridge, but I could join a bridge club. Probably get kicked out pretty soon. Okay, here's something I was working on yesterday, I think. It's a propagation fund double match. And this comes from, tolls are on everyone's mind. That's one of the first things I thought of, too. Oh, we're going to have a toll for all this mess here. So, propagation fund double match. Shellfish propagation fund with moorings for a town. That would be a market quota system project that I've spoken about earlier. But your shellfish licenses, or in the case of the market quota system with commercial fisheries, such as Nantucket has a big commercial fishery, you'd have income from your shellfish licenses or poundage fees, plus with moorings, fees for the moorings. Towns can collect a substantial amount of money for moorings and shellfish licenses. So the state funds could match what the towns collected, and I think Governor Dukakis ended that when about the same time he was dumping everyone out of the mental institutions. He also cut the state match for the propagation funds. That all went by the boards years ago, but it should be brought back. And I have tied this in to the whole bridge deal because just thought it would make sense to go more from a county perspective on these bridges. And so anyway, step number one. So we buy 3 old bridges, let's say if this were a county project, and then you put in your tolls. So then you own these old bridges, and you own the tolls and the income from the county perspective. And the way I would have it designed, it would be several counties from Barnstable County, Cape and Islands area, and then to the west, all the way to Westport. All those seaside counties would participate. So you'd then construct 24 windmills or such. You know, the grid pattern can be done in various ways. For the Georges Bank Mega Mill, I know I've got many different grid style patterns, from hexagonal patterns to square, octagonal. That is, when you're staying all these sticks and windmill bases together, you've got to have a pattern that makes sense, and I have several ways of doing that, but I don't know which one would make sense. If any of it does, I don't know. But replace in place with the sister arches. That would be step 5. Step 4 is hold for engineering or to fix or replace other bridges. That's step 4. So I don't see this as a rush to get anything done. You could put the windmills in and then not hang any bridge from them at all. It wouldn't necessarily be a great loss to do that. But hanging a bridge decks over the canal, once you've got these cables in place, is almost an afterthought. It's not like real bridge construction, where it's, you know, bridges have to be very solid, but these hanging bridges don't. They don't have to be as, oh geez, I'm getting myself in trouble. Anyway, they're different, that's all. A standing bridge is much different than a hanging bridge. What would I know? So you could go with a deluxe. You know, you'd have time to really do the engineering. Maybe after you built, what sense would that be? I don't know, to rebuild. You're born in Sagamore and then put in this windmill. I think it probably, like I said, I'm just brainstorming here. So, filled aluminum pipes as a structural unit. So I'm right and left bridge pipe as fittings. But what I'm really doing is trying to come up with things that will be low, very low maintenance. Here's another drawing of something you could hang across the canal. So this is your bridge deck here, 2 decks, because you need the strength. You couldn't, well, you could do 1 deck, but, and this is a, this is part of this yoke here. And then this is the unit here, which has your pipes on either end, a few pipes here, and you grab that with a cable, and it's all very safe. Famous last words. So I'm looking at decks now with padded decks so that everything's quiet and you're not, you know, like that would be annoying. You go over these bridges, it'd be nice and quiet. So the justifications for going 200 feet higher for the tall ships, resurgence of sail. Now that's not a guarantee, but it's possible. So we're looking out 30 to 50 years. Tourism value from having, you know, regular rendezvous with these tall ships to our region. That's huge if we could pull that off. A lot of these boats can't make it through the canal. They're too tall. And you might have to deepen the canal, you know, because these boats also draw a lot of water too. I don't know how feasible that would be. So then you'd have this long gradual grade for these bridges, but they'd be very high. So I don't know how many feet the clearances are right now. I'd have to look at the chart. Asparagus canning. What are we getting into? The market has dropped out. Bottom of the market drops out for asparagus. Subsidize canning operations. Employ prep workers. I must have a lot of time on my hands. Floating brewery and floating marine laboratory. So you'd have a cruise ship style boat. You'd have your brew batches timed, and then for a few months out of the year, you'd run scallop hatchery out of this big, huge cruise ship style boat. Tourism mixed with a floating marine laboratory, which would be good for University of Rhode Island or UMass Dartmouth. And, you know, we need to get on the stick with the fisheries. And, you know, one of the reasons for getting the propagation fund mixed up with this bridge is this. We could do a quadruple match if we went big with, let's say, the market quota system, and we used part of the tolls for the bridge for visitors services and the environment, which I had a town meeting article for Nantucket years ago about that. That was a head tax issue. So these toll bridges are pretty good because we can use them as a point of taxation. Oh, that's wonderful. Republicans are going to be spitting at me for talking like this, but the tourists want to pay their share. When they come onto the Cape, they want the red carpet. They really do. They want the shell fishing industries and fishing industry looking prim and proper and productive. So the toll saves money for the windmill construction. That's number one. And then, then you work on rebuilding and mending and repairing your existing bridges or sistering up those bridges. And then the hanging bridge will not be as expensive as you may think. This cabling is basically going to be there anyway for these tied together huge superstructures with the bases of the 80-foot diameter bridge mills, if you want to call them that, Georges Bank Mega Mill. So if you can imagine towns getting back into a production mode with the propagation funds, so the town would be really smart to tax heavily for moorings and fisheries if you had a quadruple match. That would incentivize your town to tax heavily. So, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. We don't really have shellfish like we used to at all. With this thing you could fund floating marine laboratories from the southeast coast, Westport to Bourne, Cape and Islands. And the federal may match the toll match for this project if the state matches and the people, of course, driving over the bridge are paying. So a quadruple match for the environment, for fisheries, using the market quota system would be a very smart deal to tie into this toll bridge deal. Freshwater capture to the windmill basement. Now, a lot of pumps down below, let's just say, for instance, that each dot here represents a windmill. This is a very simplified version. And this is your long bridge deck for the middle bridge, or Herring River Bridge, whatever the people of Bourne want to call it. As far as I'm concerned, would be just fine with me. But now, you've got these little lines here represent little sump pumps. I was just wondering how much fresh water is coming from the aquifer and going into the canal. Because you remember, that was all cut. The canal was cut deep down into the aquifer. So I'm just that would be another positive cash flow, because water is money. So why not grab some of it? So with this system here, it would make it easier to do that. But you don't want to draw your canal water in unless you're making Coca-Cola. The old timers used to say that was tar and canal water. That was joking, obviously. And there was a big bottling plant. You probably might have a Coke bottle or two at home that says Sagamore on the bottom. And there also used to be a tar and turpentine industry right around there. Pine knots for stove blacking. Okay, so now when we talk about tourism for this project, we're looking at tourists being able to go way up, or not, maybe not way up, maybe, but these, let's say if you had a cylinder and the cylinder had a stick, okay, the cylinder would be where you would have what I call a base cap, because this is the base for the windmill and it goes way down into the sand, a couple hundred feet. So your tourism would be up here. This might be 400 feet, 500 feet, 600 feet. It depends. But you would have a nice little clubhouse there. And you'd have 4 of these that would be tourist, and there'd be bridges, between them, possibly. So that might be huge for tourism for this whole region. This southeast coast is one of the most beautiful areas in Massachusetts. Maybe they don't want the people, but if they want more tourism, this would help. The region, it's regional. Look at everything, So I'm thinking that this whole windmill deal here would also make a good takeoff for energy synergy demonstration zone. So if you look at the Georges Bank mega mill, and that makes sense, and then you look at the tripe system and that makes sense to you, then this may make sense to you, because this would be a demonstration zone for the new green energy grid, the new green grid, which is the tripe system. So all these windmills could produce hydrogen and compressed air and oxygen-rich compressed air, the three green fuels of the future. Now, you could broaden this out and add an Orleans plant and build all these green grids based on this system, green electric grids, green tripe system grids. And I had plans for the Love Power Grid Consortium, which is part of the report on the tripe system, to buy up plants as it goes in. I don't know about these nuke plants. I would want nothing to do with that. But with the Nauset mills out there generating compressed air and hydrogen, the wisdom there is that these are off-grid, off of the electric grid, energy inputs into our new energy systems, which are based on the old and the new. And speaking of bridges, the old is the bridge to the new, using the tripe system. We use the old, coal, oil, gas plants, and we just supercharge those with this compressed air. And I'm thinking you get, 300% increase in your electricity. So you model everything for a Disney-style, Walt Disney-style pavilion like Epcot here at the canal, as long as it's okay with the Bourne town of Bourne. I don't know how they'd feel about this. I've met with them on this. This is just brainstorming here. But I'm going, being very forward here, of course. So you model everything for this kind of a thing, and that would include kids, fisheries, aquaculture displays, very futuristic Georges Bank mega mill models, and your Nauset mills, and the tripe system, and all these new energy systems. So that that would all tie in. Well, a lot of this stuff for me is detail work. So think of this steel, wood, rubber, wrap, glass tube. This is detail work. A lot of this stuff I do is like the imaginations of a janitor at the boat shop. But I have fun with it, so that's what counts, right? Since I'm not working, now that's another simpler yoke and bridge deck. That's a very simple system. And down below on the right, you've got your schematic for windmills and cabling all going across there. It's a big rat's nest. And this is the kind of work I do: hoop, stack, stick, or base construction. It's junk, but you got to go through it. All right, that's the Scannell agenda. Thank you very much. Hope this isn't driving anyone nuts. It may be best that you just use this show as a sleep aid or something. It might work if we, it might help people sleep. You never know. They may be, tune that out and go to sleep. I'd like to have clinical trials to see if this works as a sleep aid. If nothing else. Banana hanger, windmill bridge. Well, maybe that's for another show. Cape Cod Canal Bridge float in. Oh, I'm so hooked on all this stuff. It's crazy. All right, that's another episode of the Scannell Agenda. Thank you very much, Cape Codders.